Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I am delighted on this Wednesday afternoon to be joined by Patrick McGilp and John Hughes to talk all things Celtic for an hour. And we're not going to have any kind of trouble looking for subjects to discuss. Let's kick off with the Yang appeal, John Hughes. The tagline says, "It's time for Celtic to circle the wagons as SFA shows its hand again." Did we expect anything more from that appeal, do you reckon?
Well, I didn't. I was delighted that they actually made the appeal, and I was delighted that they called out Beaton. All of those things are good things, but I was never in any doubt at all that appeal would be upheld. It was a marginal call in terms of, the referee got it right the first time. It was a booking, but there's no way they're going to overturn their man on the back of, something that could be argued. So they're not going to overturn their man on that. So I didn't expect anything more. But the consequences of that, of Beaton calling it, when no one else was calling it and the referee had already adjudicated it, this goes back to the whole use of VAR and the re-refereeing of games, doesn't it? Because essentially the referee's already made his call. So unless he saw something, it's very much like in other sports. You can't go if the referee has made a call on it. You cannot go back over it. Right? And it's only if the ref has missed something you can go to it. So the referee made his call, gave his judgment. It was a booking. That was it, and that was correct. But the fact that Beaton intervenes, and now we've got this situation where the consequences of this are that we potentially have to change our formation. It does have knock-on consequences, quite serious ones, because Yang was the only winger worth a name at the club at the moment. And he was coming on to a game, and in fact, I was looking back over my notes here, 56 seconds it took for Yang to slide a slightly heavy ball through Matt O'Reilly. He only just missed getting in the end of it. And he went on from there. And the consequences of that are, will knock on now to the next few games. And then, of course, I'll let Patrick talk about the Yang appeal, because the number of things that there are to rage about in that game are quite a lot.
No, they're really well, John. And I said after the game, Patrick, and all week actually, that in terms of the disappointment I feel after a Celtic defeat, it's always going to be there. But it was I had a different feeling, a different emotion after the game at Tynecastle, in that I didn't think it was all down to us being really, really poor as a side, which I did feel after the game at Celtic Park, the 2-0 reverse at home. I thought we were rotten, we were terrible, and there was very, very little for us to kind of grasp on to try and take as a positive. And then Brendan Rodgers came out after that game saying it doesn't surprise me. So we were very frustrated. But it was a different type of frustration, and it wasn't down to the performance. Like John says, that sending off had a huge bearing on the outcome of the game. Going to go down 11v11, I fancy us against any team in the league, any team. It's just one of the things. You lose an early goal, you can bring it back. There's time, you've got options on the bench. But losing a man, that's a different story entirely. What was your feeling after the game?
Yeah, it's one of frustration, I think, as every other fan would have probably experienced. As you say, we didn't play badly. It's not the fault of the manager or the players. Maybe on a different day we could have maybe get a goal back and maybe snuck a draw. But the decisions in the first half, I think, have totally ruined the game. The penalty and the red card, I think, are the two key ones. I think our penalty's a bit soft. I think by the law, it is a penalty. He does kick him in the back. He gets in front, and the Hearts player kicks him in the back of the leg. I'd be quite angry if it was given against me, but I think by the letter of the law, it is a penalty. The red card, I think, as John said, is a yellow. He got it right first time round. It's a high foot, but I'm not even sure he makes contact with the Hearts player. The Hearts player's rushing in. Yang's not looking at him. So for that, it's not a red card for me. And then obviously the Awata penalty is just absolutely ridiculous.
Can I just say,
mid-air.
Sorry, Patrick. You make an excellent point there, because I think if you have an angle from the other side of that, he doesn't connect with his face at all. He went down diving his face. He connects, he grazes his shoulder. But from that angle, the one that they kept on going to a slow-mo of, and a screen capture on, it looks like he's kicked him in the face. He never touched him.
Yeah, it's refereeing by still images with VAR these days, and I think that's half the problem. Obviously, the penalty's utterly ridiculous. That's the worst of the lot, in my opinion. He's mid-air. He's not facing the ball. The ball's, I think it's actually coming out the box. It's on the edge of the 18-yard box. It's a stramash. There's about 3-4 players going for it. There's no way in the world that's a penalty. So it was one of frustration. I think I turned to my mate and I said, within 5 or 10 minutes after sending off, I think we'll have a clear picture of how this game's going to go. And you just knew, I think, once the first Hearts goal went in, once the penalty went in, you go in at half time, it just wasn't going to be your day. And it's very rare that it's the fault of the referee. I think, looking back at Jo Stevenson, if you're good enough, the referee doesn't matter. And I think for Celtic, that is the case. We should be good enough to be beating these teams. But, Hearts are in good form. It's always been a tough away ground. We're not in the best form ourselves. And then to have such major refereeing decisions impact on the game, 2 in the first half, it's given us a massive disadvantage there. So one of frustration, I think, and anger probably. And to be fair to the club, they've come out, they've appealed it. Rodgers has come out after the game and slated the referee, as he should, because it's a bad performance. So the club have done everything they can. The team have done everything they can on the day. So it's just a frustrating day. And luckily we get out of jail from the poor performance and the drop points at Ibrox the day before. Obviously, we're hoping to take advantage. And I think if the referee had done his job properly, we might have done. But it's now looking as if it was a get out of jail weekend.
Well, sorry, Paul John. You talk about knock-on effects of things. So the knock-on effect of Yang, we've just discussed. But even within the game, right, after that penalty, now obviously I was losing my mind at the Bernabeu when that happened. That was all supposed to have been addressed at the grand summit that they had, a summit which obviously John Beaton has yet to ascend, because he certainly didn't know what the hell he was talking about. So after that quite outrageous decision in penalty, so outrageous in fact, I very rarely write swear words in capitals in my notebook. Talk about pointlessness. There's loads of swear words for posterity. I've got half a page full of them. But my next actual note is when Iwata, who was clearly rattled then. So the next thing that I've got in my notes after that penalty that Iwata gave away, jeez. So that Iwata was penalised for, should I say. That's the one for he's running with the ball forever. Yeah. Doesn't see the man coming on his blind side. And that's Shankland's goal, and that was lucky to be offside. But immediately within the game there, because that decision has been taken, that quite outrageous decision for which both of them should be, basically reduced down to first division refs, absolutely shocking. Then essentially, we could have lost another goal almost immediately because the players flustered. Now, but the thing about that is, I thought it was because it happens so often in Scotland. You think it's the way things are done. I've watched European games. Apparently, and bear with me here because I know this sounds crazy, the referee can go to the monitor and not agree with VAR. Isn't that amazing?
It's incredible.
I know that's going to come as a huge revelation to most people, but apparently it's only in Scotland where you have to do what you're told by the guy in the bus 100 miles away.
Yeah.
Or in John Beaton's case, the Crown Bar 100 miles away. It's the incompetence there. And we've said this before, you are either corrupt or you are wildly incompetent. And in that case, if you're saying that there's no bias there, then that is wildly incompetent. And there should be sanctions for that. It shouldn't be a way. Someone has to be accountable for that. It has consequences, very serious consequences. And this season of all seasons, it has potentially £60 million consequences. And we're just going to let them walk away from that. Do you know what I mean? It's unacceptable.
I think you make a couple of brilliant points. First one I'm going to kind of delve into is the impact, the immediate impact on the player, right? So I'm just bringing up the previous one with Bernabe, because I was convinced that during that game, Bernabe started the game. I'm just double checking this, and I'm pretty sure I remember after that penalty incident, he was absolutely bemused by
Felt
it.
Felt a bit.
Was he not hooked at half time? I'm going to have a look at that. I'm sure he was hooked at half time, John.
Yeah.
So you could see that he was absolutely bemused by the decision. And I'm just checking to see whether or not he was hooked at half time. I think he might have been, because he just didn't look as though he understood what was going on, and he lost the plot basically, and he was taken off at half time. So I think you're right. The immediate impact is on the player that has given away the penalty, because they think it's a complete injustice. And obviously, I think we all agree with that. And then you've got the secondary impact to that is he gives the ball away cheaply. He's got an age to find a man on the left wing. Shankland scores a goal. Someone in the comments reckons it wasn't offside. I've got to disagree with that.
I mean, it was very, very tight. But you're talking about stupid rules. There's another stupid rule.
Mm-hmm.
You're having to draw those lines, and all that's over the line is like an elbow or an arm or something like that. If you can't score with the bit of the body that's over the line, do you know what I mean? Should it be offside? You know, I'm not saying it was offside, but I mean, you're talking about the margins are so fine,
mm-hmm.
You know, and that's another thing that's sort of ruining the game. Like, if you looked at that with the naked eye, there's no way you could have called that offside, not in a million years. Now, I'm glad that it was, but, you know, again, it's just another stupid rule, along with that stupid handball rule. And, the stupid fact that we have referees who are amateur referees in a game where people are paying for £60 million prizes. Mm-hmm. How outrageous is that? How difficult is it to fix? And again, the whole thing about the unconscious bias. Oh no, we can't ask them to declare teams because they'll all just say Partick Thistle or whatever it is. And also, there wouldn't be enough referees to go around. Well, that's not the point. You need to find referees. Yeah. You need to employ referees. You need to bring referees in from different countries. At least then, if they're garbage, we'll know they're garbage on their merits, and there's no chance that it's just bias. And there is no way, and we've had this discussion a million times, to suggest that someone who is like a major fan, former season ticket holder, turns up at pubs after games, someone like that, to suggest that they are not in any way even unconsciously biased is not backed up by any evidence of any studies that have ever been done. We've always known that unconscious bias is a factor in things far less important than this. Mm. So it is, I mean, there is not a chance. I couldn't referee a game involving Celtic, because even when I was trying, like most of us, I'm sure, you try and do your job, you try and go over the top, you might even be anti-Celtic because you're trying to prove how neutral you are. It came down to it in a big decision, big points, big prizes and all that sort of thing. There's not a chance you're not being swayed by that. I'd be digging out, never mind, Yang's foul. I'd be going back to previous games and saying, hey, did you see this in the last game? He missed it, send him off in this one. Just ridiculous. It's a nonsense. But the SFA, again, not fit for purpose. Not fit for purpose. These are things that are easy to resolve. And should be resolved by any organisation that wants to claim any sort of modicum of professionalism. It is beyond a joke that we don't have professional referees, and you've got the likes of Douglas Ross running in between trying to implement horrific Tory policies and then coming on and running the line, up and down as far as he can. He's pretty much got the same figure as I have at the moment, as far as I can tell. You know what I mean? I don't know if he's running the line or so much jogging the line. But, to have stuff like that, it's just beyond outrageous, and it's so tin pot, and it just drives people mental because it's such a tin pot attitude, and just so poor. And the fact that it's the same thing that gets us all going about certain things within the club. There are things you cannot fix, or things with your reach in terms of things that can be resolved. And then there are things that can definitely be fixed and are definitely within your remit to do so. And they just refuse to do it. And we've got this tin pot TV deal. We've got tin pot administrators, and we've got referees, tin pot referees, part-time running in. Who knows what sort of day he's had before he gets in there? He's working the morning shift at McDonald's and someone's giving him abuse. Do you know what I mean? And then he runs into the game. It's an absolute nonsense.
The big thing I would take from that, John, is that many of these issues you've raised can be resolved very, very easily. This is the thing. But because we're so tin pot as a football nation, other than the fan base, the support which we constantly go on about, other than the fact that there's an anomaly in that we've got two massively supported clubs in the country, the way that the game is run is so far removed from professional that it's untrue. And many people in the comment section last night, I was looking through some of the comments on the YouTube, were saying, the usual conspiracy, bad losers. Right, if you're going to have a conversation about it, we need to get that conspiracy thing out of the way, and we just need to deal with facts here. And the fact is, when it comes to John Beaton specifically, because that's who we're talking about after the weekend, then he shouldn't have been in a Rangers boozer in 2019 after a Glasgow derby, where he failed to send Morelos off 3 times, you'll remember, Patrick. One of them was for a Ryan Christie indiscretion. There was a stamp on Tony Ralston. Failed to send him off. He's in the boozer. There's a supporters club named after him. He's a Rangers fan. What did the authorities do about it? Nothing. And I would go a wee bit further than that and say, right, we are hamstrung by the game in which we play, and obviously that is by default, geographical default, but the club has to be stronger in a lot of these aspects. Before I move on, B raises the point, Hearts were denied a goal on Sunday, don't forget. No way was that offside. Right, I think it was marginally offside, B, but I would actually go further and say that our VAR isn't good enough. The pictures aren't good enough. Remember when we were playing in the Champions League? The big zoom in, the 360, the graphics. No doubt when something was offside. So we wouldn't even be having this discussion, B, if we had a decent VAR system in place. But as Scottish football always does, we went for the cheapest option. Now, Patrick, this isn't a dig at you. I actually mentioned this yesterday when referring to the Jockstein quote, if we're good enough, the referee doesn't matter. He did say that, and people go to that all the time. It's a go-to quote. But when Sado over here, Sado lads, remember, over here, was looking through the archive newspapers for one of the books, I came across this quote from the 6th of May, 1977. How on earth can I just put my hands on these, John? Because I'm a Sado, clearly. Right, so here's the quote from Jockstein. Where Celtic are concerned, natural justice doesn't always seem to apply. So there's another quote. To balance the famous one, there's another quote that no many people use all that often. John, you would have known, obviously, through speaking with your old fella as well. Behind the scenes, Jockstein knew what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, they all did. The refereeing back then was an absolute outrage, as was the Celtic players' treatment from the SFA. I mean, my dad couldn't mention the words SFA without adding that, changing that middle one. So, he detested them, absolutely detested them. And the treatment of other Celtic players as well, just couldn't stand them. And I don't think with the time he passed, that much had changed. But I mean, it was so, back then it was much more open. They were openly bigoted, openly anti-Celtic. And, my dad said to me when I was growing up, he never wanted really to play for Scotland, particularly because of the treatment of the SFA and the other players and stuff. And I saw he had 8 caps and thought, maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe he just wasn't, really on form at the time. He just wasn't happy with the whole setup. And then to discover that 8 caps was a huge number for the Lisbon Lions. He got more caps than half of the team.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's how biased it was. That's how bigoted it was. He's got 8 caps. There's more caps than I think than 7 of the Lisbon Lions, something like that. And that's how just outrageous it was. But he would talk about the referees and the things they would do and say, and they would make it very, very clear you weren't going to get anything out of the game, and they weren't ashamed of it at all. So when Jock's saying that, obviously been very, very diplomatic, but Celtic had to be not just a wee bit better, they had to be streets ahead. Because if you were relying on getting a call from the ref, you're bang out of luck.
Yeah. And by the way, another 9 league games where these decisions can really make a huge difference as to the destination of that league trophy jungle line. As I said yesterday, nothing will happen, unfortunately. And, I think that's where we're running with the tagline, because we all are resigned often to nothing happening, nothing good coming out of making these kinds of appeals. But I think the club need to be stronger, Patrick. And just before you came on, before we went live, John and I were talking about certain aspects of the club and how we need to be stronger. I think the most recent one is all the chat around Abada and his reasons for leaving. And it just opens the floodgates to just about anybody being given free rein to say whatever they like about Celtic Football Club and whatever they like about the supporters as well. And the only people that ever stand up for the club seem to be the fans. Because we are, this type of narrative is levied at us time and time again, but I don't see the club coming out in support of either Celtic's reputation or the fan base, the reputation of the fan base. And it's not the first time. I mean, in actual fact, when it comes to the Palestine situation, the club, I thought, had been particularly harsh in their treatment of a certain section of fans at Celtic. But if you go further back, the whole furore around the demise of Rangers, the EBT stripping the titles, same club myth. The club are silent on these big issues that mean a lot to the fans, Patrick. And I think that it's about time the club did come out and were stronger. They've written a letter to the SFA in relation to VAR and the use of VAR. They've appealed that decision, great. But they need to go in harder every single time our club is basically in the firing line. And we find ourselves in the firing line again on the back of Abada moving.
Yeah, we do. And, it's obviously this issue since October 7th and the conflict has kicked off. Celtic fans have made their voices perfectly known on the matter. And, the Green Brigade were punished by the club, largely in part because of their views on Palestine and the banners and the tifo and the displays against Atletico Madrid. So quite happy to punish our own fans for supporting these causes, these taking sides in these conflicts abroad, but not happy to stick up for the 60,000, the hundreds of thousands, the millions of Celtic fans who are called anti-Semites and terrorist sympathisers by different politicians or Israeli football team managers. And it would be nice for the club to show a bit of backbone. We all might have laughed at Rangers fans back in January for demanding the release of the tapes from the December 30th derby game. But for the sake of clarity, I think it would be good for the tapes to be released on this particular instance to see why John Beaton thinks that that's a red card and why they think that that's a penalty. Because there's no way that's a penalty. Lawrence Shanklin, Stephen Naismith, Chris Boyd, all these different guys who would have been delighted to see Celtic lose that game have all come out and said there's no way that those decisions were correct. So I think to go back to the SFA and demand the release and an explanation from the two referees who are involved in that decision, I think is more than fair enough. I think if you cast your mind back to that John Beaton incident in late 2018 where he stamps on Ralston and he has that Morelos stamps on Ralston, and isn't sent off, and the Ryan Christie incident and he's not sent off, and we'd asked for clarification. I think the police get involved because John Beaton was allegedly receiving threats, and all of a sudden our appeal for an explanation for those decisions went away because John Beaton had to phone the police. So again, we've tried to seek clarity in the past, and it's not been forthcoming. And it is quite tin pot that this is our National Football Association, and we can't even get an explanation from the guy who made the decision, who's paid thousands of pounds per game, when there's tens of millions on the line for a business. We can't get an explanation as to a crucial decision. And if you go back even further, I mean, it doesn't particularly relate to this scenario, but the way that Fergus McCann dealt with Jim Farry and the George Cadet registration, I mean, there was no messing around when it came to Fergus. He wouldn't take no for an answer. Again, a bit different from this situation, But to show that strength and to say we're not going to stop until we get answers, that's the sort of strength that you want to see from the club. And again, that relates to these comments from, I think it was Abada's old manager, came out, was it yesterday? And then I think it was around October, November time that we were all labelled anti-Semites, and the club sort of sat idly by and done nothing. They were quite keen to punish fans at that particular stage of the season. And again, they're not sticking up for the fans. So I think you're right. I think it would be nice to see Celtic take a stronger stance and show a bit of backbone.
Well, since I've been on here, Paul John, when we spoke about this before, I said, Abada basically, I was quite tough on the kids. I said they needed to essentially suck up because you're not going to agree with all the elements of what your fan base say. I'm not sure that everyone plays for Lazio is a fascist. I'm not sure that everyone that plays for Rangers appreciates the bigotry. I'm not sure that everyone that plays for us is a massive Irish Republican. I was just making the point. You're not going to agree with them. You've just signed a contract. You knew before there was sympathy for Palestine, so just suck up and go on with it. Now, when it came out he was leaving, I was like, look, that's fair enough. He had to go, really, because if you look at, his country at the moment is in the grip of these murderous extremists, and they consider the life of a Palestinian to be less worthy than that of a dog or an ant. So for him to be pictured in front of Palestinian flags, for him to be in a club where the supporters have clear sympathy for the Palestinians, then that creates a imminent threat, really, for him and his family from these absolutely insane Zionists who are just, seem to be totally running his country at the moment. And so he is under threat from that point of view. So that's fine. I was like, right, that's the goal. That's terrible. But now, within minutes of that coming out, all of a sudden we're getting stories coming out of the Abada camp and his friends before, he was getting abuse on the streets, this happened and that happened. Okay, completely not backed up by any evidence. And these sort of things, this is what I'm saying, you cannot let that go. The comments made by, the guy who's president of the former club, the comments made coming from within his camp talking about, and even that was, a couple of people said stuff to him in the street, and he wasn't happy with the way the looks he was getting and things like that. You paranoid much, mate? Do you know what I mean? It's just, try and explain to me, break down those incidents to me then. If those incidents happened, break down what was said. Those people should be dealt with. Was it a hate crime? But to just come out with this sort of, wee snidey digs that, people said things and people looked at them. What? Where you go? What are you talking about? I've tried to be reasonable. I was tough on them, and it's reasonable. Look, it's a terrible situation that they face. I haven't tried to suggest that he agrees or disagrees, although about 100% of people in his age group in that country do agree with what's going on, and he's obviously his mentor near Beaton. He made his feelings known as well. But I'm not going to. That's neither here nor there. Is there an imminent threat, or is there a realistic threat for him? I think there is. But then to say that that threat arises from the Celtic fans feeling bad. No. If there's any threat, mate, it comes from the extremist Zionists, right? The threat isn't from Celtic fans. The biggest roar of the day at the Rangers game was when he came onto the pitch after the goals. So we cannot allow them, once he goes here, first of all, if he says anything revisionist, if he pops his head above the parapet and starts making claims that are unverified or unprovable, he needs to be slapped down. And that goes for anyone in his camp as well. We cannot have these people absolutely slurring the name of the Celtic fans, because I don't believe that anything like that happened anywhere except in his imagination. And if it was true, those people should be dealt with.
Yeah, they should. Yeah. The thing is, John, I just think it's high time that the club started backing up the fan base, because it always comes down to us. We end up having to have these discussions both together, and then when it's levied to you on social media platforms and the comment section of places like this, people might think, oh, that's not serious. Well, this is real life now. Social media is here to stay. It plays a big part in terms of communication. And when it comes down to talking about your football team, people say things and they're never, ever challenged. So Leela Bader's former president was the one that made the claim, saying that he had no choice but to leave Celtic, claimed that fans had treated him disgustingly. Avi Luzon is the head honcho at the former club Maccabi Petah Tikva, and he's the guy that's made these claims on the eve of Leela Bader going to the MLS. And I think you might find that an issue, Patrick, if he goes to the MLS and he suffers some kind of backlash there as well. What happens then? What if he goes to a club who don't agree with what's happening in Gaza? Does he down tools there as well, look for a move? I mean, listen, I think it's for the best that he leaves Celtic after everything that's happened. But you go to the MLS club, does that guarantee that it's not going to happen elsewhere?
No, it doesn't. And, he'll not find those guarantees unless he goes back to the Israeli league. I mean, if I was to put money on it, I would say most of these franchises, is because that's what they are in America, they're not as passionate, I would say, as Celtic, with the rich history and the sort of generations of supporters. But, there's no guarantee that he's not going to be, maybe face a bit of hassle in the street. And I'm not even sure that that's a football issue. I mean, if he's facing some sort of abuse while he's walking the streets, surely that's a private matter that he can deal with the police. I mean, that's not really. I mean, the person might be a football fan, but I don't think that comes into the realm of the behaviour of Celtic supporters. But when he goes to, I think it's Charlotte, he's away to. It's entirely possible that there are a large group of Palestinian, people who are in solidarity with Palestine and the struggle they're going through, and he faces some sort of hassle either in his private life or while he's on the pitch. And it's I can't speak for every Israeli player, but I imagine because of geopolitics and what's going on and what has been going on since early October, it's probably a situation that they're all facing. And although they might not share the views of Mr. Netanyahu and what they're doing, this could be an issue that they face because of what their country's doing. And I think it is a case of what John's saying. It's a case of not every supporter's going to agree with your political views, and it's just a case of getting on with it. I mean, you're paid rich sums of money to play football, and really, that's what you should just stick to. We use, as fans, football as a way of expressing our, political voice or our beliefs. Celtic is a deeply political club, and I know UEFA want to keep politics out of football, but I don't think that's possible when it's a working class sport. But when it comes to the players, I'm sure it's well known that Celtic fans were showing solidarity with Palestine well before Abada signed. I'm sure he knew what he was signing up to. And as John says, I think he just needs to get on with it. I think it's best for all parties that he does leave now. 10 million, considering the circumstances, I think is a brilliant fee for Celtic, if that is the true amount. You can put that into reinvesting in the squad in the summer, now that Mark Walwell's gone. And I wish I'd had every success in his career, because he himself has never come out and said anything. It's all been presidents and agents and his party and stuff like that. So I hope he does well. Good business considering the circumstances, and good luck to him.
I'm going to throw this one to you then, John. Last point on Leela Bader before we actually start thinking about who we're going to be playing right wing this weekend, because we're down quite a few right wingers all of a sudden. What about the next time a 19-year-old Israeli player comes along with bags of potential that you can sign for £3.5 million and turn a profit on over a couple of seasons to 10 million quid, and the club realise that they are no longer in the market for bringing in a player like that? I think that the club remaining silent isn't good for them either, really, because I mean I can't imagine any young prospect coming to this football club. Because if you just remain silent about it, then you're almost giving credence to the quotes that have been made in terms of the Celtic fan base, which were wrong, absolutely wrong. but as a football club, they need to protect their self as well. So surely they should come out and speak up about this.
Well, they need to protect ourselves and they need to protect the fans, but I don't think on the basis that there's going to be someone coming along and signing. That'll be a long way away. Again, the way things have gone in that country, there is a very, very significant extremist element, and they wouldn't want to be associated with us at this point, any young players or anyone else, because I'm going to get, a fair amount of quite serious abuse. Potential threats, all the rest of it from their own people. It's not coming from us. We have no problem with them. Bring the boy here unless he says or does something outrageous. Then more than welcome. But you just the club cannot have it just permeating that somehow the support are all anti-Semitic or or whatever it is. It's just not true. It's absolutely fundamentally not true and needs to be shot down wherever it arises. And you can see that, even in the chat today, you can see there's friends of the dark side, who are there just saying, oh, chased them out the club, all the rest of it. They love this because what it does is, it's gaslighting from their own bigotry. So, they're trying to make us look like bigots because that's their whole brand. So from the club's point of view, I think it's very important that they take a strong stance on this stuff where they see it. I don't think it's enough to just ignore it. But in terms of Israeli attitudes or Israeli players, it's not going to make the slightest bit of difference.
What it does leave us with, if we're going to just talk football for the next 5 minutes or so, Patrick, is an issue at right wing. You've got Jota leaving the club at the beginning of the season, of course, for big money. And then Haksabanovic falling foul of an Instagram post, and he was away. Marco Tilio not fancied by the gaffer. Mikey Johnston, perhaps, given his last throw of the dice, he's away as well. And we've now got Abada on his way out the door and Yang suspended. So how many right wingers is that we've lost? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 this season already. Who do we play on the wings? Do we change our shape? How do we deal with this situation that we find ourselves in?
Well, I mean, I think you still get Maeda and Palma available. I know Ange like to play him on the left, but I think Brendan's been playing him on the right, Maeda. Palma really out of form since December, but he's got the stats to back him up. He's available, unlike all those players that you've listed. So, I mean, it's pretty bare bones, but we do have enough to field a team. It's just about how good these players have been, and the answer is not very. Palma hasn't hit the heights, as I say, in 10, 12 weeks. Maeda, it's hard to fault Maeda for the work ethic and the press, and he did press well because obviously we're down to 10 men. Hearts had a lot of the ball. He did do a decent enough job, but on the ball leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion. Very little footballing ability on the ball. So, you've got James Forrest in there, and there have been times in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months where you've thought he must be close to a game because the wingers are such an issue. I mean, it was an issue in terms of quality a few weeks ago. It's now an issue in terms of selection. Mm-hmm. And you're now looking at guys like James Forrest, who, we gave a deal to 18 months ago. A couple of weeks ago, we're trying to get rid of him. He's only got just over a year left. I think he's 32. I want to say 33 maybe. Losing his pace as a winger anyway. But, you're looking at guys like that come back into the squad, which is just another indictment of where the squad is. I mean, obviously, it's hard to foresee the Abada issue. Obviously, Yang's only a 2-game thing, and, you can't really account for that, refereeing mistakes. But, it's an indictment of where the squad is, that we don't really have quality or even availability at this stage in the season. And it is such a crucial stage because if you look throughout the season, Hatate, very rarely available. Carter Vickers, very rarely available. And then if you look at the 3 players that we've lost, Starfelt, Moy, Jota, that's half your team from last season. Mm-hmm. So in terms of availability, Abada, in fact, has been injured basically the full season. So you're looking at 6 crucial guys from last year. Bit unlucky, a bit of bad planning. We didn't spend the money we did spend, poor players. But it's been an issue all season, and in my opinion, up until the split, apart from Ibrox, I think we've got fairly easy games. 2 games against Livingston, they're an abominable side at the moment. They're terrible. St Johnstone, far from a great team, especially if they're coming to Celtic Park, and then St Mirren at home. I like to think that should be easy enough. So we should get through the next 2 or 3 games, get Yang back, and it's just about building momentum going into that game at Ibrox in just under a month.
We keep talking about it, don't we? Keep building momentum just to get over that hump. I'm going to bring this up before I come to you, John, on where that leaves us with another right winger out. Jimmy Duff, it's supposed to be a football show, not a political show, right? So let me put it to you a different way, Jimmy. We're going into this game at the weekend. Yang's going to be suspended, and we can't play Leela Bada, who's one of the most talented young players we've seen coming to the club over the last few years. Do we then discuss why we can't play him? Because the reason we can't play him goes right back to political issues that both he and his people back home have faced, the pressure that he has been put under because of the way that the Celtic fans are able to protest against the treatment of Palestinians, not just since October, but since the 1940s. So you can't speak about Leela Bada not playing for Celtic without mentioning the political background. It's unavoidable, Jimmy. It's unavoidable. We have spoken about it. And I'm going to say to you, John, all of a sudden, from loads of right wingers and loads of options, we now find ourselves going into that game with Nicholas Kuhn, who was on the bench at the weekend. We've got, you just laughed there. What are you laughing at? He was a £3 million signing.
I didn't even think of him there when we were talking about it.
I know.
He's so far out the thought process.
I wrote him down thinking £3 million, just like that. Lewis Palmer, of course, can come back and he can play both wings, or he can switch with Maeda. You've got Maeda himself, James A. Forrest, who was mentioned by Patrick, and of course Rocco Vata, who's had a few appearances this season and last season. What do you do there? Do you just bring in, like for like, John, do you just bring in another right wing, or do you look to change the shape? What do you reckon will happen against Livingston?
Just to put Jimmy's mind at rest, just to make a non-political point about John Beaton, as he's saying, he's this part of the world, collusion is not an illusion. But we'll just leave that one there. Forrest, Maeda, Palmer, Vata, I think the answer to that is self-evident. As we've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks. Go 4-4-2, go 3-5-2, do a diamond in the mid, whatever you need to do. But our two, the best striker in Scotland is Kyogo, where form is temporary, class is permanent, and Kyogo is the best striker in the country. Ida looks very, very good, apart from his decision to take that penalty. I mean, you're going to take a penalty anywhere. That's not it. It has to be off the ground because you're just giving the keeper such a great chance. So it's, to me, it's self-evident. We do not have. We were talking about bringing James Forrest back, who hasn't played a game or kicked a ball really significantly in a good while. Maeda is either, he's so hit or miss. He's just like, if you get a ball through and he latches onto it, he can score you a peach. But, a lot of the rest of the time, he's not really a very good footballer, which is incredibly frustrating. And I said before, you have to decide with Maeda whether you're prepared to accept all the bad stuff for, all the good stuff. And with him, I think it's maybe 50-50. Palmer is inconsistent. Vata we haven't seen. So I think what will almost certainly happen is there will be Maeda and Palmer, either whether left or right, both of them can do either. That's what he'll go with, and I would not be a fan of that. I wouldn't play that way. For me, the two best players at the moment seem to be most on form are Ida and Kyogo, certainly best and most important, if not on form. I'd want to see the two of them playing together. I think most teams in this league would be demolished by the two of them playing together. And all we need to do is not give it up down the wings and not spend a whole load of time. Again, even if you're coming to the likes of Livingston, you could be playing into their hands, just, getting it down the wings and lobbing the ball into Ida, because that's the kind of thing they're set up for.
Yeah.
So, we need to be more intelligent than that. I'm sick of saying it. I don't think we should be playing wingers when we don't have wingers. They're just not good enough. I'm not even, when I said Forrest Maida, Palma, Vata, I didn't even include Kuhn, because why would you? I think young Vata at this point, to be honest, is either much, much worse than we think he is, or he's got to be feeling really hard done by. Because if we go wingers again and he's not on the bench, or even if James Forrest is getting in front of him, it's one of those two things. He's either really, really bad in training and we just don't know how bad he is, or he has got to be raging at this point.
Yeah, I know. You're right. Where is he in the pecking order? That's what he'll be asking himself if he doesn't get a look in. I don't think he will get a look in, certainly not in the starting 11. I'd like to see him on the bench, though. Here's the way I would play it. And let me hear your thoughts in the comments. And obviously, Patrick and John, you can let me hear your thoughts as well. You start with Joe Hart in goals, of course. Your back four picks itself at the moment with Alistair Johnson, Greg Taylor, Carter Vickers and Scales. But what I would be putting an onus on here is the inversion of the fullbacks. They've got to really tuck into the midfield for me, overlap the wingers. I think what they were doing against Dundee was great. And Motherwell, because Taylor with his ball in for Ida, I think that was great, playing the balls in deep when Ida finds a bit of pocket of space. And then this is what I would do with the midfield. I would play Matt O'Reilly and Iwata. Iwata gives you the insurance if you need to link up between defence and midfield. I would play Kyogo up top, but as a number 10 style, whereby you can obviously come back and do a wee bit of work in the midfield and then push up. Ida's your focal point. I think he'll stick with his wingers. And the wingers, interchangeable for me, would be Maida and Palma. So it's more of a 4-4-2, but your inverted fullbacks, there's a big onus on them. Your wingers are, switching sides whenever that is necessary. And you've got Iwata playing a wee bit deeper, Kyogo playing a deeper forward role, so he's coming into the midfield. And I just think you're flooding the midfield there, Patrick, with your inverted fullbacks, and it would be far too much for Livingston to contend with. I've heard a lot of people talking about 3-5-2, and I get it, but I don't think we've got wing-backs. I still don't look at Taylor and AJ as wing-backs. I think inverted fullbacks is a different role, and that's not, I think, their strength. So I'm going 4-4-2. Can you see that working? Can you see them doing it?
I can see it working. I don't know if I can see him doing it. I didn't actually think that we played that badly at the weekend. I don't think it was down to the performance. I think it was the decisions from the referees. So I would go with a largely unchanged 11. Obviously, you can't play Yang, so I think you put Palma in there and you have Palma and Maeda on the wings. I know Ida missed a penalty, but again, I don't think he played that badly. I think he was unlucky not to score, actually. I think I've got a question over Bernardo, because I thought the game totally passed him by. I thought he was so uninvolved, it was unreal. So I'd maybe look to bring in a player in the midfield. But again, when you look at that, McGregor's out, Hatate's out. I'm wanting to drop Bernardo. You've got Iwata and O'Reilly still in there. So you're looking at Daniel Kelly to bring into the midfield. And, I think he's done all right in the 2 cameo appearances, but I wouldn't be playing him from the start just because Bernardo's had one bad game. So I think I would be actually largely unchanged, apart from Palmer coming in for Yang, if I'm being honest. I could maybe see him going the 2 up top, but despite it working, against St Mirren and against, I think it was the first 60 minutes of Kilmarnock when we drew, he doesn't seem to like it. He's determined to change it every time we play it, even though we seem to be sort of, I wouldn't say we're playing brilliant when we play that formation, but we're getting through games and winning them. So I don't think he's keen on that. So I would go with the same 11 and swap Palma in for Yang if I was to make a prediction.
Listen, I think you're probably right, because it's very predictable at times, isn't it? The start 11. John, how do you like the look of that or not? I'm trying to shoehorn Kyogo and Ida into the same team here. I'm trying to get them on the same.
So who did you put in your midfield there, Paul? Sorry.
I've only got two central, which is Matt O'Reilly and Iwata. I know Iwata's had a bit of criticism. I think he was spooked. I think it's a great point you made, John. They're my two central midfielders, but Kyogo is going to drop when necessary, and Iwata's going to drop more defensively when necessary. Your two full-backs are coming inside there, inverting, and you've got Palma and Maida switching wing to wing. I think that'd be too much for Livy. I think we would win the game comfortably.
Yeah, well, I would like to think, we could put out the B team boys and beat Livy in the state that they're in at the moment, but, that's unlikely. I mean, we're certainly not, people saying, we should have won that game or should have done well against Hearts. We are not playing well enough to play for 75 minutes. In fact, 90 minutes if you add in extra time, play for 90 minutes with 10 men. We are not playing well enough for that, not even close. Would we have won that game with 11 men, in my view? Probably quite comfortably in the end, but no, we just our form just isn't there at the moment, so we need things to go our way. I'd be more interested in trying either Iwata, Matt O'Reilly, Bernardo, possibly Palma in a 10 role, or put Kelly or Holm in there and move Matt O'Reilly into a 10 role. As long as you've got Kyogo and Ida up front, I think with those two up front, will win fairly comfortably anyway. But you can pretty much 100% guarantee it's going to go exactly as Patrick said. They'll just switch one out for the other.
Yeah,
which is annoying to say the least. Because you know what you'll get from Palma. You might do a couple of good things, but I don't know. I think if you put him more central, if he's more involved, maybe he'll be his skills, because he does have a bit of a wand of one foot anyway, peg leg on the other, but he's capable of pulling out some lovely bits of skill. And maybe if he's almost like forcibly more involved by in that central role, we might get something more out of him. But certainly if you're going to experiment, you're talking about dropping Kelly in there. No problem dropping Kelly in there. This is Livy we're talking about here, and young Kelly. If you're not going to play him in this game, when are you ever going to play him? And you could say the same for Vata, as a matter of fact. If you're not going to play them in these games, when are you ever going to play them? Especially cup game. Quite frankly, the cup. I'm so frustrated by what's happening in the league. It's very difficult to get your head around really caring about the cup, other than as a developmental tool for helping us get this league one. So I've been saying for months that I think we should play in a different way, but that's obviously not going to happen. And I don't think it's going to happen. But I think whatever formation gets Kyogo and Ida on the pitch at the same time is whatever I would play.
Yeah, I'd be really keen to see that as well, John. I'm going to bring in some of the comments before we talk about a couple of other issues that we've not managed to get through so far today. First one, there's a report breaking just as we were live here, actually, that Alexandro Bernabe may well be on his way to South America to play for SC Internacional. 23-year-old left back. It looks like it's a loan deal to the end of the season. Now, I don't rate him. I don't think he's a Celtic player. I don't think he has a future. What do we do if Greg Taylor gets injured or suspended?
I'm just going to say, what are you talking about?
Seriously.
What are you talking about? We're going to the left back.
Who plays in his place?
Let him go. I mean,
Seriously,
he's garbage, but, that's mental.
It's bizarre. And it's a loan deal. A loan deal. I mean, seriously, who do we play? Tony Ralston out of position?
Well, it would be Ralston. It would have to be Ralston.
Yeah.
That's been the way in recent times. But, I mean, he played about 20 minutes, I think, but I quite like Mitchell Frame against Feyenoord. He's 18. I think he played left wing, actually, but I think he is a left back. But, again, that's the sort of depth that you're going to when you're... I wouldn't go for a loan deal. I mean, I want to get rid of him as much as the next Celtic fan, but... No, I wouldn't be taking a loan deal for Bernabe at this stage.
No. And Mitchell Frame, is he not injured? I think we were talking about Frame coming in before, because he seemed to be a replacement for Bernabe, and I think he was injured at the time.
Yeah, right. I think so. 1,400 strong, watching a Celtic state of mind all over the world, and we appreciate every single one of your views, unless, of course, you're in the comment section with Union Jack emojis talking nonsense. Keith Oakton is not talking nonsense. He's given us a big hello all from Plymouth. Is it sunny though, Keith? Or do you just tell us when it's beautiful weather? We've also got Kevin Graham in here. Stop paying for VAR and demand independent VAR refs from other countries. Yeah, that would be bold. Someone else in here, where was it? I'm going to bring it up here. Here we go. Tell me to stop moaning. Here we go. Tommy McAleer, love the avatar. Absolutely best avatar I've seen all day. Waffling on about the board being silent. You won't give up your season ticket, so nothing will change. Aye, because you then have to go on a waiting list for about 3 years, Tommy. Don't waste yours and the subscribers' time complaining until you're ready to act. Right. See,
in reference to what? What was that in reference to?
Well, I think it was the club sticking up for fans when it comes to Israeli managers and presidents.
Tommy, that's a nonsense point, man. What the hell are you talking about? So people are going to give up their season tickets because the club don't make a statement. What are you talking about, man? No, I mean, we're trying to get people to potentially give up their season tickets to do something about the recruitment, which might actually be worth doing, and that wouldn't happen either. So, we're talking about we're not wasting anyone's time talking about because what you're talking about is basically suicide bombing, effectively, of your Celtic season ticket or your Celtic attendance. So no, we're not going to do that. Nobody's going to do that.
The only time, John, that I ever thought boycotts were absolutely called for was when the club was at risk of disappearing. And I know that people round about those 30 years ago now, Monday, around about that time said it would never happen. There was always people who would step in, and I get that, right? But there was a real fear amongst the fans, and it was the fans who acted, and all credit to all the guys who were involved in the movement, Save Our Celts and Celts for Change. But at that point, I could understand why, because there was an actual reason. Because if we boycotted the game and it went under a specific attendance, it would trigger the bank to call the loan back in, which then would start the ball rolling with regards to the old board being unable to continue running the club. Fergus McCann comes in, of course, writes the cheque 8 minutes before the receivers are called in. So I can see it then. I've seen a lot of this over the last few weeks, and there's actually a Twitter page dedicated to it, whereby Celtic fans have to stop buying merch and give up their season ticket. It's not going to happen. I would never harm the football club in that way. Personally, I would never do that. I think that there's other ways you can do it. You've got to start communication channels. I know that the Celtic Trust are looking to do that by securing 5% of shares so that there's a voice. They can call on an extraordinary general meeting if they're unhappy with what's happening at the club. There's other ways to do it. I don't agree with giving up a season ticket. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as I've got the means to buy a season ticket, I will always have a season ticket.
On that point, I was informed that rather depressingly that it was pretty much 100% Dermot Desmond that got shot of Lowell. I found that very annoying, simply because I thought Michael Nicholson had, eventually found his feet and found his voice and found his courage and done something about it, even with a nod and a wink from Dermot Desmond. But no, apparently Dermot Desmond sat him down and told him he was resigning. So that's for me is really disappointing. And you're talking about giving up season tickets and complaining at the club and all the rest of it. This is a club with £70 million in the bank and a billionaire shareholder who's calling the shots. So you're not forcing anybody's hand doing that. There have to be other ways to protest, but you're not going to be forcing anyone's hand financially. It's just a nonsense point. And I've said it before, I would love if it would make a difference, but it's not going to make a difference. And you're not going to get enough people to do it, regardless. No. Can you imagine? I mean, we can't even get agreement. If I imagine if I was to go down these comments just now, it'd be, at least sort of, 70-30 in terms of, whether people would be prepared to do that. And I think a lot of the time people who say they are prepared to do that don't have a season ticket. You know what I mean? So they're making that sacrifice, on behalf of the people who do have a season ticket. Yeah. It's just a load of noise. Dermot Desmond's calling the shots, and you're not going to get to him that way, so you need to be more creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if that's the case, and I've got no reason to believe that it's not, John, I think it is disappointing as well, because what it shows is that the people at the club in positions where they should have that strength of voice, they're not using it, are they? They're waiting until the big fella who's not really there that often, makes the call. And you should have people at the club, Patrick, who are strong enough to make the call without, the intervention, if you like, of Dermot Desmond every time.
Yeah, and that is the problem. I think that's why the trust are trying to accumulate shares, and why, I think we should be encouraging everyone to try and accumulate shares in any way that they can. I'm not no financial expert. I don't know how we as a support can do that, but there's obviously structural issues where you need to go to Dermot Desmond every single time there's a major decision, when he's actually one of the least involved and least, experienced in the day-to-day running of the club. And to steal one of John's favourite phrases, I think the club do need to show a bit more testicular fortitude when it comes to making these decisions, especially Michael Nicholson, because we can't just go running to Desmond every time.
No, you're right. Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. 1,500 strong on a Wednesday afternoon. Loads to talk about. Listen, it's all good-natured debate. We invite you to come in and disagree with what we're saying. That's what it's all about, and we enjoy it. What else is Acsom up to? Well, we're bringing Paddy McCourt back to Glasgow. He's not been here for a few years now, so he's coming back to Glasgow. First time in about 3 years, and he's going to join me on a stage at Gracie's. The ticket link is underneath the video. And also the new shop's launched. So if you want some natty Acsom merchandise, get on that shop. Kevin Graham's book of poetry is on there as well. The only book of poetry in the world dedicated to Henrik Larsson. Don't know if Henrik's got a copy of that yet, but we need to make sure he does. Anyway, if you want to check it out, the link is underneath the video.
Can I just say, Paul John, your that interview you did with Neil Lennon, which was obviously prior to COVID season and all that. That's an hour long this morning. That was an hour. That was one of the funniest hours of the funniest podcasts I've ever listened to.
How good is
absolutely brilliant. That was
How
fantastic.
good is he, John? He was brilliant. He was brilliant. And because we actually moved the audio podcast onto a different platform about a year ago, there's a lot of the kind of old archive episodes that are not on there. So we're going through them. And as John said, the one that was uploaded this morning or last night was Neil Lennon. And it is 1 hour of absolute gold. I love it. I loved listening back to it, actually. And he was on great form. And you can hear the crowd. It was the Royal Concert Hall in Glasgow, 1,500, all cheering his name. Fantastic. Hopefully one day that will happen again. And he'll speak to me on stage. But I don't know. Maybe. We live in hope. We live in hope. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you to John Hughes and Patrick McGill for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.